Okay, welcome everybody. And we are going to be talking today, and we're going to be recording this as a first class on how to teach the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. This is intended for people that are keen on and understand the importance of teaching the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach to the residents of the world. This is something that's particularly important now that we see that everything that we thought was kind of the order of the world until now is something that's in a tremendous amount of upheaval. And we are the carriers, we're the ones who are transmitting from generation to generation the great message of hope for all of mankind, that there is really a greater world and a greater intention for the world than what meets the eye. And we can go back to the beginning of time, and we see that from the very first human being. We see that through all of history, that there was an intention and a desire for a much greater world that was going to be a fulfillment of what it means to be living in God's world. And this is something that, if we look through all the teachings of Judaism, we see that it's something that's completely found its way, it weaves its way through the entire history. And we refer to that as the era of Mashiach. We refer to that as the time of the Messianic era. And we see that one of the primary changes, and the Rambam says that the main change between now and when Mashiach comes, what's going to be the main difference between now and when Mashiach comes is going to be that there's going to be a difference in the relationship between the Jews and the non-Jews. And the Rambam also brings an incredible statement over here that really the entire service of all of mankind with the coming of Mashiach is going to be to learn and understand God. It says that, there's going to be, and we see the end of Hilchos Malachim, Perek Yud Beis, we see that there's going to be no strife, no disease, no hunger, no jealousy, no competition, and there's just going to be good found through the entire world. And it says, the entire occupation of the world is going to be to know that there is God and know God. And it's interesting, it says in many different places, and we're going to go through these, and today we're going to just do an introduction to the whole approach to teaching Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. But future times we'll get together and we'll be able to go into much more detail into the Rambam, into the Gemara, to the Rebbe's teachings. Also, there's another sefer of Yonason Steif, Mitzvos Hashem. This is a sefer that he put together with the intention of that it has a whole section on Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. I'll get into that a little later. In addition to the sefer that we were zeicher to publish, the Rebbe's Kol Ba'elam. This is the sichos and letters of the Rebbe on Sheva Mitzvos. So the Rebbe brings out an incredible point over here. This says that this really means the entire world is going to be learning about Hashem. And that's going to be the entire occupation. So we have to understand that the job of the Jewish people has always been, and why was our forefather chosen as the one to be the priest to the nations, was specifically because he took upon with self-sacrifice the role of teaching all the nations of the world. Compared to other people who, for example, in his own time, were teaching Torah, were teaching the concepts of the Torah, but they actually didn't continue with the mantle of the leadership and guidance that they're meant to give to the entire world, because they did not go out of their way. They sat in a yeshiva, they sat and taught the students that came to them. We see that Yaakov Avinu came to their yeshiva, Shem Ve'ever, and that is, it was a tremendous thing that they were doing. It says over here, hold on one second, to admit somebody. There we go. So this is a tremendous, an incredible thing that we have, that a yeshiva at that time. But why weren't they the ones that were going to carry this message? Their children, were they not the ones to carry the message to the entire world? It's because Abraham took upon himself with self-sacrifice to engage not only with mankind and bring them in to try to teach them and actually teach them about the oneness of God and that there's a loving God that creates them at every minute. But we also see that he even went to the extent of trying to save all those people. And he negotiated and argued with God to save even the people that were completely transgressing God's will. He was taking upon himself that mantle of leadership to care for them. That's why he's called Av Hamon Goyim. That's what we are meant to be, the ones that are teaching the entire nations. We're the Or Goyim, we're the ones, Mamlechas Kehanim, we're the ones that are meant to be carrying the special purpose forward. So you might ask yourself, what's the urgency to start right now? Why not wait until after Pesach? Everyone's busy for Pesach. So I want to mention a couple things. There's two Yom Tovim that people, when you speak to Yidden about how the non-Jews have a connection to every one of the Jewish holidays, there's two that are particularly difficult for people to grasp the connection. One is Yom Kippur, and one is Pesach. Yom Kippur, incredibly, the highlight of Yom Kippur, at the most important, holiest moment of the day, the Haftarah that's read is the Haftarah of Yonah, a Navi being sent to Nineveh, for the purpose of teaching the world that there's a possibility of tshuva, that when everything is going wrong, and there's even a decree to eliminate, God forbid, massive portions of humanity, the Yonah is sent with this message to go ahead and save that entire nation, which he was successful in doing. And it's interesting that as a Jewish person, he actually originally refused to take this obligation upon himself. He actually tried to run away from it. And the consequences to him were very severe. And we see from the entire story of Yonah that the purpose was to be able to teach us, and everyone should know that God does accept the tshuva, that because God does accept the process of human beings after they've strayed from serving God, whether it's because they're not honest in business, so they're not moral in their conduct between each other, or they are worshiping idols and believing, putting other ideas ahead of the idea of the unity of God. Don't forget that worshiping idols in the full context of it does not just mean bowing down to the dust or to a wooden or gold idol. It means bowing down to any idea that takes precedence over the concepts that God is teaching about the primacy of human life and what it means to be an upright human being created in God's image. So Yom Kippur is therefore this incredible, at the height of it, it's talking about the mission to the world to be able to teach the world that you have an ability to have a direct relationship with your Creator. So Yom Kippur that's the highlight. We get to that point, and everyone's bidding the most money for that Maftir Yonah because it represents that concept of the leadership in the world. The other Yom Tov that's difficult for people to grasp is about the special role of what the role of the Yom Tov is with relationship to the nations is Pesach. Because we come to Passover and we get the idea that Passover is a Jewish holiday. It's about us going out of Egypt. It's about us being taken out of Egypt. It's about us being taken to Mount Sinai. God split the sea for us. All of these concepts which are causing us to miss a fundamental point of Pesach. Hashem brought the Makkahs on Mitzrayim in order to educate the Mitzrayim that there's one God. The entire process was meant to bring about a recognition among the Egyptians that there's one God. And it's interesting, even the archaeologists have a period of time where there was a pharaoh that became a monotheist. And it's I'm not an expert in all the archaeology, and not that it's really relevant, but the point is that there was a shift in Egypt at a period of time as a result of these lessons, as a result of the transformative effect of the Makkos and the Yetzias Mitzrayim. This was something that we see also, that it didn't only affect Paro and his subjects, but it actually affected the rest of humanity. As an example, we see that Yisroi got himself to come to having heard of this, came to Moshe and came to Bnei Yisrael. After having served all the different idols, he was now affected by the going out of Egypt, and the Kriyas Yamsuf and the Milchamas Amalek was something that affected him tremendously, and he then came. We also see that we just celebrated Shabbos Hagodol, and the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch that the Nes Hagodol that occurred on Shabbos HaGodol, the Shabbos before Yetzias Yisrael, was that there was a transformative effect of the Jews speaking up directly to each one of their Egyptian neighbors and telling them that they were taking this idol of the Egyptians to be slaughtered and that the firstborn would then be killed. And the Rebbe explains that the purpose of this was to teach the non-Jews, the non-Jewish residents of Egypt, that the way to freedom from physical slavery, you first have to have freedom from your spiritual slavery. As long as you're spiritually enslaved inside, as long as you subjugate yourself to other people in your mind and other forces in your mind other than God Almighty and solely God Almighty, then a person will become a physical slave because he will look to the physical providers of his needs as the source of those needs, because spiritually, that's where he's looking for. He's looking for other forces and other ideas to take care of him rather than the unknown, the God Almighty, which is really the unknown. We can't know God. We can't know everything about God. We can't even know very little about God. So what happens is that a person trades in. It doesn't really work for me not knowing what's going to happen from day to day. I would rather work for a human employer. I would rather work for some sort of God where you could put the coin in the meter and then the result will come out much more easily. That becomes the level of thinking that then subjugates humanity. So together, and I will get more into these different, God willing, in the future, go into each one of the Yom Tovim and explain these in detail. But that's why Pesach is really a Yom Tov of celebrating the example to mankind and the liberation of Egypt, that Egypt eventually came around to recognize that there's one God. And they eventually turned around to support the Yidden to leave. And they actually, Paro came in, and they say that Paro did Sheva. And there's an opinion that he became the king in Nineveh, which is the story of Yonah and Yonah Navi and Yom Kippur. So when we're sitting at the times of the Seder, what we're really recognizing is the kindness that Hashem did to us, but this special role that he took us out of the Mitzrim. Instead of becoming swallowed among the nations, we were taken out to have this special role, to continue the role that was started by Avram Avinu, and now we are going to transmit this message to the nations, both through the examples of what happened in Mitzrayim and also through our teaching, which we're going to get to. Now, taking all that together, what's special about today? So we see that the world is in a state of upheaval like nothing that we've ever seen and really ever imagined that there would be such an upheaval. And everyone is full of fear and panic. The leaders of the world are panicked. In panic, when a person's panicked, they do not make good decisions, no matter how well they explain it and look how reasonable it is. The fact of the matter is there's many, many different consequences to the actions that are being taken. And into the power, in the coattails of the power grab that is being done now in the name of public health, there's also the power-hungry people come in their wake. And God forbid. So there's a tremendous, tremendous upheaval in the world. Now we have two possibilities what we're supposed to be doing over here. We could be saying, let's go back to the way it was. We want back our shuls, we want back our yeshivas, we want back 770, we want back all these things, and hearken back to the days of old. But in reality, what our prophets have been saying and what our Rebbe has been teaching us all along is that we're not supposed to be hearkening back to the old days, we're supposed to be looking forward to the future. And this is really what if we look back into the sichos of Tafshin and Aleph, Tafshin and Beis, and the sichos before that, we see that the Rebbe says in the famous sicha of Koyach Nisan, he says, I've done everything I can to get you to want to bring Mashiach. He didn't say he'd done everything he could as an individual, because the next thing he says, I'm going to give tzedakah to bring Mashiach closer. But to get you to want to bring Mashiach, I've done everything I can. So there was a big tumult after that. And people came back to the Rebbe and they said, no, Rebbe, we want you to do it. He says, listen, forget it. I already told you since the beginning anyways, from Yud Shvat, you got to do the work. But then after people kind of got that message, they said, okay, tell us what to do at least. So the Rebbe said, learn in Yoni Gula Mashiach, go into the Navi, learn all the Yoni Gula Mashiach. So why do we have to learn the Yoni Gula Mashiach? Because we have to understand that the purpose of learning Torah and particularly the Inyan Megula Mashiach, is to be able to see the end vision, the end goal of what this is all about. There's a principle in business called the Merlin principle. And for those that you are in business will understand the Merlin principle. Basically what you do is you envision your dream business, what it's like sitting in the office in the business on that day, Hayom HaGodel, so to speak, that your business is like, the big successful business that you want. And then you think, what was the last thing I did before I got to that step? Okay. Then what was the thing I did just before that? What was the thing I just did just before that? And you work yourself backwards to where you're sitting right now, which could be in your garage and could be in your business with 5 employees and barely making payroll. And what you realize is you now have a plan how you're going to go forward. So the same concept applies here. Why the Rebbe is telling us to learn in Yonah Gula Mashiach is not. It's not a segula. It's not just that it's going to transform us to think like a Gula Dick mentioned, people that are thinking about the redemption. It's in order that we should see the plan. And if you look at go through the Nevi'im, and if you want to knock your socks off, because unfortunately people don't learn this as much as that we could. If you start with a Chumash, with a Tanakh, and you start with the Nevi'im, you'll see that the vast majority of what it talks about in the transformation of the times to come talks about the nations of the world. The nations are going to be transformed. The nations are going to come up to Yerushalayim and bring korbanos. The nations are going to come and take the tzitzis of the Yidden, and they're going to say, teach us the way to serve Hashem. This is what is talked about in the Navi again and again and again. All the Nevi'im speak about this. So that's what the Rebbe wants us to look at, and he wants us to work backwards. He's saying, I want you to so much want Mashiach that you start to work backwards from the Hayom HaGodol, from your big success, and go backwards. What would I have done before that? What would I have done before that? What would I have done before that? And if we take ourselves back to this very moment in time, then the next thing I need to do is to teach a non-Jew that there's a God. I need to teach the non-Jew that there's a caring God, a loving God that's creating him at every minute. And he doesn't even have to think about it in some big philosophical sense. He could just sense the fact that he's breathing and realizing there's a creator giving him life. So what this requires is a personal relationship. There's a lot of discussion we'll get to in later classes. We could talk about different materials that have been prepared for Sheva Mitzvos. And there's often a discussion about, which materials did the Rebbe approve and which materials did the Rebbe not approve. And the point I want to bring out about that is that I cannot speak to the details of everything that the Rebbe said yes to and didn't say yes to, but what I surmise from reading the Rebbe's Seichos, where the Rebbe and so much wanted us to teach Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, because what I'd like to suggest is that the Rebbe wanted us to see beyond merely having a little postcard to give to somebody. That's not a relationship. That's an information drop. That's like, when they bring in helicopters from an invading army and they drop flyers down, surrender or else. That's not a relationship. That's just tell people, this is the decree. A relationship is when you sit down with somebody who the Rebbe says again and again, the people that you have contact with in your personal life, in your business life. This applies to the shluchim. It's gam the ikar of role of the shluchim and the shluchis is to teach the non-Jews in their areas. They're responsible for these people. Each one of us in business, we have employees, we have business contacts, we have judges and other lawyers and people in the hospitals for a doctor and people in the car repair shop. Our job is to speak to them about that there's a God that loves them and there's a plan that God has, and this is the way God wants us to conduct ourselves. That's what the job is of every single Jewish person. That's why we're here. Now, in addition to all this, we have another angle, which we have to wake up to with tremendous, tremendous intensity at this moment in time. We want to focus on the positive. We want to focus on how the world is going to transform, and there's going to be an incredible redemption. At the same time, the Rebbe says in a letter to General Drazen, who was a brigadier general in the United States Army and a top chaplain over there, the Rebbe says in a letter to him that the Rebbe took the trouble to write Erev Shabbos Kodesh Breishis, which can you imagine the Rebbe is writing this in the Tafshin Mem Zion. So Erev Shabbos Kodesh Breishis, Erev Shabbos Breishis, the Rebbe is busy with a million things. And the Rebbe is writing this letter. And he says over here, there's of course no need to emphasize to you the importance of promoting these 7 Noachide commandments among Gentiles. In our day and age, it does not require much imagination to realize that. By way of example, had these divine commandments been observed and adhered to by all the children of Noach, namely the nations of the world, individually and collectively, there would not have been any possibility in the natural order of things for such a thing as a Holocaust. So what I believe the Rebbe is telling us is this is in our hands. It's in our hands to change the world, because the Yidden are the ones that are meant to teach the Sheva Mitzvos to the nations. And ultimately, it is our responsibility that when the nations are in chaos, when we see, I represent a Dr. Glassman in a fight against physician-assisted suicide in the state of New Jersey, which is God, it's an unbelievable murder-suicide. When I went to court and I see that the judges, it doesn't even register them with the concept that this is murder and suicide. They want to check if the box, whether it's a constitutional principle or whether it's a regulation is being violated. And ultimately, last week, the case was Dr. Glassman's heroic battle. It was dismissed by the Superior Court of New Jersey because no one has the right to challenge that it's a murder-suicide. No one has standing. In addition to the judge finding every reason why there's no basis to challenge the law, and it's just fine. So we see that the deterioration that has happened and occurred in this nation, in this world, that's our responsibility. I might be busy shuckling a Mehudadik, Lulav, and Esrog, but if a judge can't say that something's murder and suicide, that's because I let the chinuch, the whole education system, go to where the judges are being educated that this is normal. So when we see, and this is the most refined of the people, we're talking about a judge in the Superior Court in New Jersey. We see that there's parts of the country where there's no law and order. Well, only momentarily, maybe while a police car passes through, like the Rebbe said, as soon as the police go, it becomes a free-for-all. And sometimes now we see that the police cars are even attacked and the policemen are attacked. So that, whose responsibility is? That's my responsibility. And I want to suggest that's the responsibility of every single Jewish person. In this Sefer Mitzvos, I want to just share this also in terms of the importance of this. And this is Rabbi Yonason Steif who wrote this. He was the Goyen Av based in Budapest before the war. And he wrote 3 sections of this incredible Sefer here. The first ones are Mitzvos of Amunah. And in each of the Yud Gimel Ikarim, he explains how it's connected to non-Jews, how non-Jews are also obligated in the 13 principles of faith. In the second chelik, he talks about mitzvahs between Adam ben Adam l'chaveroi. And the third chelik, he says, is called Kuntras Dinei B'nei Noach. Now, the first 2 sections were printed in 1933, came to the print. He also wrote the third section, Kuntras Dinei B'nei Noach. And it gives me chills every time I tell this story because it is so incredibly moving that this Goyen Av based in was writing halacha l'maaseh for B'nei Noach. And what happened was, when we found many years later the manuscript that had never been printed, there is in handwriting on the side, on the margins, in the original manuscript, it's a message to the printer, to his friend the printer, and he says, this is extremely urgent. Please print this as soon as possible. That was in 1933 when Hitler, Yamach Shemai, was coming to power. Rabbi Yonason Steif saw that this was the antidote to the Holocaust. We needed to educate the nations about what the way was to conduct themselves. And tragically, it never came to print in 1933. And it was not printed until, Baruch Hashem, we had the schus of bringing it out in the world. And now it's something that we're going to learn. But the point is, you could see the importance of this, and the great Gedolim see this. They see, the Rebbe sees this, and Rabbi Yonason Steif sees it, that this is what is necessary in order to be able to transform the world. So this is why this is so vital at this point in time, to recognize that this is really the way that we have a responsibility to ourselves. You know, we have to recognize that we have a responsibility to ourselves to make sure the world transforms. And that's on the making sure, God forbid, something negative doesn't happen. And even more importantly, we have an obligation to the world. We have an obligation to the Creator who created this, wants us to make a dir b'tachteinim. We have to go and teach this. It's also very interesting that the Rebbe points this out, that in the Rambam, which if you learn the Rambam, if you step back from the details for a second and you see the grand panorama that the Rambam basically it's a tapestry, a big mural of the entire creation. That's what the Yad Chazaka is. People learn it as a Sefer Halacha. It's much more than that. It's a enormous panorama of all of creation, starting with that there's nothing besides Hashem, then working us through how we're supposed to live as human beings and making sure we don't get into the mistakes that a person could make to take them away from that unity. And then it sweeps back to this grand conclusion, which is really rooted in the beginning, that the whole world will recognize this oneness of Hashem. So what's the halachas that come right before the halachas of Mashiach? Is the halachas of Bnei Noach. In order for the world to come to this recognition, it requires the teaching of Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach. And we see also by the Rebbe that in Tafshin Mem, in 1980, all of a sudden the Rebbe started talking about Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach non-stop. In every sikh, and the Rebbe said, why do people keep asking, why do we keep talking about this? But you'll notice that was the decade of Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach, and then by Mem Ches, Mem Tes Nun, it starts to really go full speed into the Inyanim of Mashiach. It didn't drop any of the Sheva Mitzvah stuff. If you learn those sikhas, you'll see that the Rebbe is talking about Sheva Mitzvahs at the same time and transforming the world. But in order to prepare us for this great mission, the Rebbe spent a decade talking to us nonstop about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach and our obligation to teach. So this is the ultimate preparation for the world by the Rambam, by the Ar Rebbe, and this is an individual obligation. So I want to just spend a moment here and start. I'll tell you what my intention is, and God willing, this will go Machayel Ochel, and more people. This was prepared on short notice, and this recording we'll record this, and people can then start to use this as a basis and continue from here. My vision is obviously working my way backwards from the ultimate day, the Yom HaGadol, the Mashiach is here, and we are in the Beis HaMikdash, surrounded by 8 billion human beings, and by that time, once they stop all the forcible abortions and they stop all the forcible birth control in Asia and in Africa and all this terrible, terrible tragedy that goes directly against God's will, we'll be surrounded not by 8 billion, we'll be surrounded by 10 and 20 and 50 and 80 billion and more human beings that will come to Yerushalayim to offer korbanos, and they will be supporting the Yidden in our avodah. So that's the Yom HaGadol. Working our way back from that, my intention here is now to be able to present to you that you should be able to feel confident and capable of being able to go and make a shir with non-Jews, to sit down with your neighbor, if you don't feel comfortable because of social distancing, call them, email them. I haven't seen you in a while. You're mailmen. But it's got to be in an oifen panimi. It has to be in a way of a relationship and being able to teach them and continue to teach them and continue to explain to them what it is that God wants from them as a human being. So that is the point I want to bring out here. So my intention is that we're going to start a journey together. We're going to start with the basic principles, and then we're going to go deeper and deeper and go into the different source materials. I find that when people go to a shir, a lot of times a person who's giving over a concept wants to start with a lot of Mayim and Mekaymis, a lot of sources, and go into the details. And what happens is people get lost. My intention is to do it in the reverse way, which is we start with the general concepts. We start with the general concepts, and then we go, once we get the general concepts down, then we can get into the details. But the key thing is it has to start now, meaning to say, you do not have to become an expert in anything in order to be able to teach this. If you're born a Yid or you became a Yid, you already know enough to be able to teach a non-Jew that there's one creator, that there's one God, there's a God that loves you and him and her. This is you know enough already. You don't have to be prepared with all the answers. The Mitzvah Shem will set up a way that you could ask questions as you're going through the teaching process, and the Mitzvah Shem will create a log of those and then a collection of the questions and the answers, and so that we can get those that clarity for more and more people. We'll all benefit from everyone's experience, and that's the goal. Now, it's interesting. I'll just share with you a beautiful story of the Tzemach Tzedek on this regard. I think it was, I heard him, forgive me if I got the details of who the chassid was of Peretz Chaim, that he went to the Tzemach Tzedek, or I think his brother did. He wanted to learn Tanya with the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Tzemach Tzedek said, okay, I'll learn with you. It comes to the Rebbe's study, and the Rebbe starts reading the Tanya. And he starts the first parak of Tanya, and he's reading the words, going through the Tanya, just reading. And after a while, this went on for a few weeks, and then this chassid said, why am I troubling the Rebbe to just read me what it says in Tanya? So he didn't come back. Sometime later, the Rebbe saw the brother that had made the request for the learning session, and said to him, what happened to your brother? He doesn't come back anymore. He says, Rabbi, he didn't want to matriach you, he didn't want to trouble you to have to read him Tanya. He says, oh, okay. By the way, this is how my grandfather taught me Tanya. First, he read it to me in a very simple way, and then he learned it again with me a little deeper, and then a little deeper, and then a little deeper. And that's, I think, the most important, powerful way to learn. Because when we can open up, just the Tanya as an example, we can open up a lessons in Tanya, and then we're like reading every pirush and everything. By the time we have got into all the details, we lost the main point. What is the Alter Rebbe trying to tell me? What is this all about? So the same thing is over here. We have to keep focused on this following point. All of humanity was created in order to be in a relationship with the one who is creating him as a living human being. That's the simple point of life. That's the simple point of Yiddishkeit. Everything in Judaism boils down to that one point. And everything that we do flows from that. Everything that we do is meant to remind us of that and reinforce that concept. If you take every single sikh of the Rebbe, every single letter in Igros Kodesh, it all boils down to one point. We get lost. So we start asking a question we're confused about this thing and confused about that thing. So we see that the letter is addressing a question about a personal issue, a shidduch issue, a parnasa issue, a military issue, whatever the issue is, but it's all the same point. The Rebbe is trying to say the same point and is saying the same point every single letter. The same thing was every word in Torah is saying the exact same thing. Every mitzvah is saying the exact same point. What's the point of that? Well, what does it look like when we are connected to that point? We experience something, a feeling, and I don't mean an emotion, I mean a feeling of well-being. We experience a feeling of well-being, that we are cared for, that everything is okay, and that there's nothing to worry about. That is the feeling of being in a relationship with God. And that is the feeling that every human being is meant to be experiencing. And we are meant to be experiencing that all the time. We get distracted from that. We get worried about different things. We start to be worried about this, worried about that. And that leads to all things that we call misbehaviors. If a person feels that he is taken care of and that everything is fine, then he is very able to work in business and not steal. He doesn't have to steal because he knows he has everything he needs. Even if it looks like right now he only has food for one dinner, he does not have to cheat on his taxes. He does not have to lie to his customers. He does not have to underpay for something that he got and the supplier made a mistake. Why? Because he has a sense of well-being. And in that sense of well-being, everything negative is avoided and everything positive becomes available. Because when I feel that I'm okay, I can share what I have with you. And we see that the Rebbe encouraged people to give tzedakah because we understand that sometimes it works both ways. If I'm feeling okay, then I can give to you. And sometimes I don't feel everything's quite all right. And the Torah comes and tells us, give that coin anyways, and that will create you, it will educate you. By giving that coin, your physical action will educate your thinking and educate your consciousness to realize that you really are okay. So that's why we have Torah and mitzvahs. Torah is a transition of the insights into the oneness of all of creation, both the insights that are directly from Hashem and the insights that were gifted to the wise people in every generation. And we have our own insights also. On a daily basis, we could start to see things in our lives that our own insights, because Hashem created us that way, to be able to have insights into his oneness. And then we have things that we're meant to do that are going to help reinforce that. And things that we're meant to keep away from doing, because sometimes we do feel maybe that we should be taking something that doesn't belong to us. And so we have a reminder, even though you're feeling that way, you're not feeling so connected right now, you're not feeling that love from your creator, don't do it anyways, because he's letting you know, here's the message system. The manufacturer is telling you it's not in your best interest. So when we can recognize that, that's what we're trying to get everyone to that recognition. And that's what will naturally lead to every human being conducting themselves that way properly when you are connected and when you're going to connect other people. So this is why our job, when we're going to teach people to feel secure in their relationship with their creator, that their creator is always there for them, and to ignore insecure thoughts. I don't have enough love. I need to take this. I need to get this. I can't give this. These are the things that our job is to be able to educate people. So this is the general principle of relating to the non-Jews of the world, to let them know that. That's what Avraham Avinu did when he brought them into his tent. He wasn't just, it's not an intellectual experience. That's what I want to bring across here. This is so important. And it took me years to understand that. I was involved in printing this sefer over 21 years ago. And I did not get the point. I'll tell you honestly, I did not get the point. I thought that this is we got to teach them the rules, and we've got to conform their behavior, and there's all the details. And it took me 21 years to finally realize that no, this is about an experience of helping people open their eyes to what already exists for them. They already are created by their creator. God is creating them at every instant. We're all lost. We're all lost in forgetting that. So what we're here to do is to open their eyes to that. Open their eyes. That Ro Kol Boso Yachtav. Everyone's going to see that there's nothing besides Hashem. That all that I feel, all that I exist, everything that is, and beyond that, what I can even experience is all from Hashem. There's nothing besides Hashem. So that's about a feeling. It's not an intellectual experience. We need to use our intellect to be able to hear and read and learn and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's all. And first step, the real experience is the feeling of that knowing, that seeing that there's nothing besides Hashem. That's what we all have had experiences like that. And we are meant to have those experiences more and more frequently if we can stay on track. And our job is to help each other in that, and also to bring the entire world to that understanding. And we have to realize that there's one message and one point that we have to get across that is the key over here. The relationship of Hashem, of God Almighty, to his creations is one of love. The entire Torah is founded on the principle of love. I think it's Ibn Ezra writes that in Devarim, that the whole point of life is for love. Life is for love. That is what it's about. That's what all this is about, to be able to establish that relationship, with all of humanity. To be able to establish that relationship with all of humanity, that the flow of Hashem's creation is a flow of love. And it says over here, it says very interestingly in Yonason Steif's Sefer, he brings a Pelladic concept that the mitzvah v'ahavta l'reacha kamecha applies also in our relationship with non-Jews. And he brings a proof, which we'll get into in a later opportunity. But the concept is that we are meant to be transmitting the message of Hashem's love for all of creation. We are meant to be feeling that ourselves, and that's what we are meant to be transmitting. So I want to emphasize that, because I'm speaking about my own growth experience in this area, that I thought there's a lot of intellectual concepts. You sort out all the rules, and you sort out all the information, and you have all the sichos and the gemaras and all this kind of stuff, and then you kind of tell a person as a recipe, this is it. No, that's not what it's about. It's about making the person come alive with the recognition that there's a loving creator, and that where I'm coming from is a place of love for this person. It's not just, here's your card, and now see you later, and I've done my job giving you the card which tells you Sheva Mitzvos Noach. It's about transforming that person to see that you're coming from a place of love, just like Avraham Avinu was coming from a place of love. That there's a creator that's creating them from a place of love, and that they will then walk away as their own experience will be the feeling, a constant feeling that they are loved by their creator. And then that's what automatically solves all the problems. Then a person's going to automatically keep all the mitzvahs. Why would he need to worship an idol to try to get something? People don't worship idols for intellectual reasons. People worship idols because they feel they need something that they're not getting. So if they could realize and see that it's not, when I say realize, it's not an intellectual experience. It's an experience of seeing that everything you have and everything you need is provided by the one creator, Hashem Echad. Ein Oy, there's nothing else besides Hashem. Then a person does not need to go and serve an idol or serve a human being, because they recognize that they see where their sustenance comes from. So then they don't need to worship any idols. They will proclaim the oneness of Hashem in the world. That's what's going to happen. They won't need to have improper relationships. They won't need to have theft. Each one of those things that are not appropriate activities for a human being, that it's interesting, every one of those activities takes away from the dignity of a human being. Because a human being, what's the ultimate dignity of a human being is when they are acting and conducting themselves and carrying themselves in a way of honor, of kavod, which is the inyan of malchus, which is the inyan of being representing that divine presence in the world. When a person loses sight of that and they can't see that anymore, then they start to conduct themselves in inappropriate ways, taking what they shouldn't have, trying to get more, trying to subjugate themselves to another human being, or trying to subjugate other human beings to themselves. That's the root of it. So we have to keep this very, very simple. It comes down to the one point of all of Yiddishkeit. All of truth is one point. There's nothing besides Hashem. There's Hashem Echad and Ein Od Milvadai. Ein Od. So we're going to wrap up for tonight. But I wanted to start today and not wait till we could even get more, publicity and so forth, because it's so vital that this ball starts rolling, and each one of us is empowered to do this. And the key thing over here is we surrender so much of our power as human beings by looking to organizations. Well, there's an organization that's taking care of tefillin. There's an organization that's taking care of mikvahs. There's an organization that's taking care of, there's a yeshiva over there. Well, now we see in our times that there are no yeshivas, Rahman al-Islam, but if we could learn one thing about our own personal responsibilities, there's no synagogues, there's no rabbis to give us drushas, there's no bias malis forum. If you don't have this forum in your house already, where are you getting them from? And on Shabbos, Eitzer HaChochma is not going to help you. You either are ready to be the Mayan HaMizgaber, that the Rebbe wanted that every Chabad house should be a 770, and every house should be a Chabad house, which is a 770, that even though 770 is closed, and even though your Chabad house is closed, you are the Chabad house. You are the Chabad house. You are turning your children shliach. Your house is full of sforim, and you are able to conduct everything that would happen in 770 is happening right now in your house. And what is 770? 770 is the Eil Omim. It's the Beis of Ben Bavel. It's that beacon place that until the moment we're going to land in the Beis of Mikdash. That's what we have to realize. And same thing with all the Batei Mikdashes. Even if a person is not a Lubavitcher, the base medrash is Mikdash Ma'at. So this is the call of the hour. And now youth and I thought before that, hey, other people will take care of this for us, and I got to go to work, and I'm too busy for this. The fact of the matter is, there's no work for most people. There's nowhere to go. There's no yeshiva to teach in. There's no, even the people teaching yeshiva only teach for 1.5 hours or whatever it is today, because it's all online and so forth. And the kuda is that we are gifted with this power to realize that it's about us. And I want to conclude on one point on this, which is that when the Navi says that 15 of the goyim are going to come to you and take your tzitzis and demand from you, show us the way to teach Hashem, doesn't say over the Navi, you're going to say, oh, you know what? Let me call Rabbi Mr. Shliach to take care of you, and let me call the head office over there, or call Rabbi Smith, and he can answer your questions. That's not what it says in the Navi. It says that you are responsible for those human beings. You're responsible for their spiritual well-being, and because you're responsible and direct and guiding them correctly in their spiritual well-being, they will have physical well-being. That is your individual responsibility. And if you only know Aleph, which is that there's nothing besides Hashem, that's enough to go out and teach every single human being you meet. And reach out to everybody starting now. This is the call of the hour. The Mitzvah Hashem, next Monday night, I hope to continue this in Mitzvah Hashem. And the reason I want to do in Chol Hamoed Pesach is a very simple reason. As we explained before, the special connection of Pesach to the Umas Ha'olam, and our job to teach the Umas Ha'olam, that the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim was for the point of teaching the Umas Ha'olam. That's why Hashem took us out. He took us to Har Sinai to receive the Torah, to put it to the Shivim Lashon that Moshe Rabbeinu did. That next Monday night, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to learn some of the Tzicha, where the Rebbe explains the difference between Mashiach and David HaMelech, and the difference between Kezer and Palgi Kezer, which is directly the concept of Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. The special role that Melech Mashiach has is that he's the king of all the nations. And it's for us to make that a reality. This is something that the Rebbe talked about without stop, and he showed us the way by his own letters that he wrote. Rabbi Shapiro, who's Nissim Mendel's son-in-law, told me that he has a safe full of letters that the Rebbe wrote that have never been published. Even today, he's sending out some at a time, but he has letters full of letters the Rebbe wrote to presidents and prime ministers in countries that we barely even heard of, telling them how what the proper way to conduct their countries are, and what their policies should be on different issues and abortions and so forth. So, Emir Hashem, the Rebbe's example to us is that we are not afraid to say what's right. In fact, the whole world is looking to us. And I'm going to finish on, I said I was going to finish on one last point, but I'm going to finish on this point so you can share this at your Seder. Rav Yonason Shteif asked the question in his Hakadama over here. Why does it say in the Gemara, Ein ben David ba ad she kol hamalchis yihafech leminus? Why does it say that King Mashiach is not going to come, Ben David, King Mashiach is not going to come until all the nations of the world turn over to denying God? So he says in a beautiful thing over here, and hopefully we'll get the chance to learn it together inside. He says that what will happen is, as the nations become more and more atheistic, and the governments become atheistic, and all the regular structures of morality are dismantled, the world, Rahman al-Islam, will descend into a chaos. And all the human beings in the world are going to recognize that this chaos is coming from the lack of any moral compass and any moral guidance from their leaders. And they are going to then turn to the Yidden. And they're going to rush to the Yidden and say, please, please teach us the ways of the eternal principles that you have been carrying for all these thousands of years. We want to listen to you. This is what drove Rav Yonason Shteif to write the halachas of mitzvahs b'nei Noach and write the mitzvahs of Emunah, and explain to us how the non-Jews also have to believe in the 13 principles of faith. Because this is the time we're in right now. And we're preparing ourselves through coming together to learn like this. We're preparing ourselves for the spiritual willingness. Again, it's not about the amount of information you have. The most important thing I could get across, and I'm speaking to myself also, It's not about how much information you know and whether you could say the Sheva mitzvahs forwards and backwards and whether you could list the 30 mitzvahs that are explained that the 7 are really 30. What matters is, are we ready? And we are ready. And we're those that are here and those that are going to hear this. We're all ready with a spiritual fortitude to go and recognize our role in the world. The purpose that we are here in the world is for this purpose, that we are here to teach the nations, and the nations are now and increasingly requesting this and demanding this and crying out for this, the moral compass, the eternal principles, which is the principles of the Torah and the principles of what the Eibishter has guided us to be the messengers to bring into the world. And amidst Hashem, we should be, and we are, zeicher to be part of this. And we will see the binyan Beis HaMikdash that is going to come down. This is going to be a process of chesed and rachamim. And whatever plans, like the Rebbe said, whatever, God forbid, anyone has a negative plan, will be nizbatel automatically, because the whole nation, I don't need to convince a president of a country of how to conduct his country. I can speak to my neighbors. And those people will demand a change in their government, just like the Becheres did in Mitzrayim and Shabbos HaGadol. This is the transformative power of Torah, and it's each one of us, it's our peh that has the capability to do that, and we are going to do that. And the Mitzvah Hashem, we will continue to do that. I know there's some questions here about the time zones and the time differences in Europe and so forth. People are participating from Europe. We'll have to solve all the technical issues. But a Mitzvah Hashem, between now and next time, that starting immediately, there are human beings that you could reach out to and talk to them, and you may stumble with the words, and they may ask you questions which you don't understand, and that is 100% okay, because you are doing your and my and all of our role. And the fact that we don't know all the answers is they're not expecting us to know all the answers. They're just expecting us to care enough to tell them what we know. That's all they expect. And when we do that, that will nullify and melt any anti-Semitism in the world, other than the little anti-Semitism of that little portion of humanity called the Malik. But the rest of the confused humanity will see the love and the care and the intention that we have for them, and that we go out of our way to express ourselves and tell them what the truth is. They will reciprocate with tremendous affection and gratitude that this is what we are here to share with them. So this is what we're capable of doing, and this is what's going to be poil immediately and directly. The coming of Mashiach, it is something that is, we can see today how information travels completely without limitation, and literally in a harif ayin, that is hine ze Mashiach ba kvar ba. The humanity itself, from one of us teaching, 2 of us, 10 of us, 100, 1,000, 15 million teaching, that will transform the world. And like the Navi says, that those people, Yidden, who don't even want Mashiach, will be dragged to Yerushalayim by non-Jews that recognize that every Yid has to be in Yerushalayim. So we can say, oh, I have to teach the other Yidden. It's true, you have to do both at the same time. But teaching the non-Jews will have an even bigger effect on the Yidden that until now have had trouble grounding themselves in the reality that there's only Hashem and there's nothing besides Hashem. So thank you very much for participating. You should have a kosher and freilich and Pesach, and we should be zeicher to bring the Korban Pesach this year. It's not too late, and there will be not only no social distancing, will be tremendously crammed in with every single Yid in the Beis HaMikdash and every single human being coming to the shores of Eretz Yisrael to witness and to participate in their special ways in the service in the Beis HaMikdash. And we should be zeicher to that now. Take it from Yad Mamish. Amen. Thank you very much for participating.